I stood there quiet, my hand hovering over the plate she said I wasn't allowed to touch. 6 Thanksgivings, 3 years of unpaid favors, and the stroller she forgot I paid for. Gone, erased behind her curated smile. "These are for the guests," Lauren said, like I hadn't once been family. But I didn't flinch, because the receipts were in my bag, and the plates she guarded so proudly, they were mine. "We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from." It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The first thing Lauren said when I walked into the dining room was, "Don't touch the good plates." No hello, no smile. Just that, like I was a stray dog sniffing around her linen napkins. I paused with one hand midair, hovering inches from the stack of white porcelain edged in gold. Her gold, I assumed. I smiled instead of answering. Old habit. One of the many I picked up in this house. Don't speak unless invited. Don't outshine Lauren. And for God's sake, never forget who gets the final word. Nathan didn't even look up from the wine bottle he was opening. "What's wrong with the good plates?" he asked, casual as always, twisting the corkscrew with his usual charming oblivion. Lauren just waved him off, then turned her back on me. "Nothing. I just don't want fingerprints all over them before the guests arrive." Guests? That's what I am now. After 6 Thanksgivings under this roof, after the nights I stayed up rocking their daughter through colic while Lauren drank book club wine until 1 a.m., I took the seat furthest from her at the table and folded my hands in my lap. "You okay?" Nathan asked, glancing at me with that soft-eyed concern he thinks is subtle. "I'm fine," I said. And I was. Technically, I'd spent the morning breathing through it, rehearsing my calm face. Pat had coached me on the drive over. "You're not there to win. You're there to survive." Except I'm not sure Pat believed that either. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I slid it out and checked under the table. "Pat. Time to turn the tables." I stared at the screen a beat longer than necessary, feeling my heart knock against my ribs. There it was. That tiny shove I needed. Because I wasn't here just to survive. I glanced around the table again. Everything was perfect in that too perfect way Lauren liked. Napkins folded into fans, wine glasses gleaming like they'd been polished one by one, and in the center, the good plates, stacked like a quiet dare. They looked expensive. But then, so did Lauren in that cream blouse and gold earrings. Everything about her whispered legacy money, even if I knew better. I slipped my phone away and reached for my bag beneath the table. Quietly, carefully, I pulled out the red folder Pat had handed me yesterday. Receipts, bank statements, screenshots. It started with the email Lauren accidentally CC'd to me instead of her assistant. She'd called me a clinger, said I'd overstayed my usefulness. Then came the grocery charges that didn't match the Venmo request she sent me. The brand new stroller charged to my Amazon card, the monthly wine subscription I'd never signed up for. And now, these plates. I'd noticed the brand when she posted them on Instagram last spring. They looked familiar. Too familiar. I flipped to the back of the folder and found the matching charge. Crate and barrel. $624.19. The credit card number partially masked, but the last 4 digits were mine. Lauren didn't buy the good plates. I did. The air left my lungs in a slow, quiet stream. "Something wrong?" she asked, eyes locked on me like she could smell the shift. I met her gaze. Smiled again. "Not at all." Nathan poured wine into my glass and held the bottle up. "More?" I nodded. I needed something to do with my hands. The front door opened then, and voices floated in from the foyer. Her parents. The real audience. Lauren smoothed her blouse and rose to greet them, already slipping into daughter mode. Warm, polished, performative. I stayed seated and watched her hug her mother, kiss her father's cheek, guide them toward the table like a hostess on a mission. No one looked at me. No one asked about me. Lauren returned to her seat, adjusted a fork, and leaned toward me just slightly. "You don't belong here anymore," she said under her breath. Not angry, not dramatic, just confident. I turned to her, held her eyes. "Neither do those plates," I said softly. She blinked. That sneer, small, involuntary, flickered at the corner of her mouth. The same one I remembered from 5 years ago, when she'd first decided I wasn't quite good enough to be her friend anymore. I tucked the red folder back into my bag and picked up my wine glass. Let the show begin. Lauren's laughter drifted from the kitchen like perfume, sweet, practiced, and hollow. I stayed at the table, tracing the rim of my wine glass, watching the gold edge glint under the chandelier. The plates gleamed back at me, unbothered, untouched. Mine, technically. Though no one here would believe that. Yet. Nathan carried a bowl of roasted carrots to the table, still smiling in that unshakable good guy way. "I think we're all set," he said, half to himself. "Feels good having everyone together, doesn't it?" I nodded, though my stomach was tight. Everyone together meant me being the uninvited echo of a past they were trying to rewrite. Lauren's mother leaned in to kiss my cheek. "It's been so long, Eleanor. You look wonderful." "Thank you, Mrs. Hale," I said softly. The smell of her perfume, rose and starch, pulled me back to the days I used to help fold napkins beside her, back when I still belonged here. When she turned away, I pulled my phone out under the table and tapped a text to Victor. "Eleanor." I checked. "I definitely paid for them. Her name's not on the receipt." "Victor." "Then you have leverage. Use it." Quietly. Victor was never one for drama. My accountant, friend, and part-time voice of reason. He'd been the one who first noticed the strange charges when reconciling my 1099s. Lauren floated back into the room, cheeks pink from the oven's heat or maybe the attention. "Let's eat before it gets cold," she said, taking her seat across from me. I watched her cut into her chicken with unnecessary precision, like every move was part of a silent performance. Nathan poured more wine, his focus still adrift. He didn't notice the tension, the pauses, the careful silence between every other word. He rarely did. While they passed dishes and stories about the new house renovation, I slipped my phone into my lap again. A new message had arrived. "Pat, document everything. Record if you can. You never know what you'll need later." I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the record button. But instead, I opened the camera and snapped a photo. The good plates glinting beneath the chandelier, wine glasses surrounding them like guards. Click. Lauren looked up. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Just capturing how beautiful the table looks." She smirked faintly. "Well, I do have an eye for detail." I bit back a laugh. "You have an eye for other people's wallets," I thought. After dinner, when everyone scattered, Nathan to the den, her parents to the porch, I slipped into the kitchen, carrying 2 of the plates carefully, as if they were evidence. The kitchen smelled of lemon cleaner and overconfidence. I set the plates on the counter, opened my bag, and pulled out the red folder again. Under the receipt, I found the note Victor had printed for me. Purchase authorized under joint credit. Merchant, Crate and Barrel. Cardholder, Eleanor M. Price. Co-approver, Lauren A. Hale, temporary. Temporary. That word burned. She'd asked me to borrow my card when hers had been maxed out, just until her new one arrived. She'd even Venmo'd me a partial payment back then, before I stopped hearing from her altogether. So yes, the plates were hers in spirit, but mine in fact. I didn't plan to humiliate her. Not yet. That wasn't what tonight was about. I just wanted her to remember. The back door creaked open. I turned. It was Sophie Kim, my quiet ally in all this. She'd been helping me secure every piece of documentation since the first charge. "You're really doing it?" she whispered, closing the door softly behind her. "I'm thinking about it," I said. "Don't think too long," she warned. "If she gets wind of what you have, she'll spin it. Make it look like you're unstable." "She already has," I said, a tired smile forming. Sophie stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then you need to make sure every penny lines up. I backed up the bank data just in case." I looked at her. "You did?" She nodded. "You'd be surprised how many ghosts live in online statements." The clinking of forks and laughter echoed faintly from the dining room. Lauren was in full performance mode now, probably charming her parents with stories about her boutique consulting firm. Sophie brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You sure you're ready for this?" I took a breath, glanced down at the plates gleaming between us. Ready? No. But done being her background character? Absolutely. She smiled, small and proud. "Then you know what to do." I picked up the plates again and carried them back toward the dining room, steady and calm. Lauren turned as I re-entered, laughter fading mid-sentence. Our eyes met. I set the plates down at my place and said, almost casually, "You know, it's funny. These were such a thoughtful purchase." She tilted her head, wary. "What do you mean?" I took my seat, fingers brushing the gold rim. "Just that not everything you own was really yours to begin with." The room fell quiet enough to hear the air conditioning hum. Nathan looked between us, confused. "What's going on?" Lauren's smile cracked just a little. I smiled wider. "Nothing," I said. "Not yet." Lauren rotated one of the plates between her fingers like it was a Fabergé egg. "Crate and Barrel," she said brightly, holding it up to the light for her mother. I chose the gold rim because it pulls in the warm tones from the wallpaper, makes the table feel elevated without trying too hard. She said it loudly enough for the whole room to hear, like the words had been plucked from a Shelter magazine article she read 3 minutes before we arrived. I stayed in my seat, sipping my lukewarm tea. Every guest at the table nodded politely, and Nathan, sweet, clueless Nathan, leaned forward, proud. "She picked those out herself," he added. "Spent hours comparing sets online. I think they're beautiful." Lauren smiled at him. I caught the faintest glance she tossed my way as she did. A tight flash of teeth that didn't quite make it to her eyes. She was testing me, seeing if I'd flinch. I didn't. Instead, I raised my phone under the table and took another photo. Lauren holding the plate up like a trophy, Nathan beaming beside her, and her parents nodding with the kind of practiced interest only rich people can master at a dinner party. My phone buzzed with a new message. "Pat, don't push too soon, let her keep digging. You want them all watching when she slips." I swallowed a smile. Lauren set the plate back in its spot gently, as if it were made of bone china, then glanced at her mother again. "I wanted something timeless. You can't really go trendy with dinnerware, unless you want it to look cheap." I took another sip of tea, holding the cup steady even though my hands had started to tremble. Another text. This one from Victor. "Victor, I reviewed the authorization details. You're clean. The The card use falls under an individual charge, not joint debt. It's yours to disclose. He added a thumbs up emoji, which looked strange coming from him. I typed, so she can't countersue or flip it. Victor, not unless she wants to lie under oath. I'd be thrilled to depose her. I tucked the phone away. Lauren's mother asked how business was going, and Lauren launched into a breezy explanation of how consulting was booming. No mention of the 3 clients who'd dropped her last year, or the quiet pause in her LLC's tax filings. Nathan caught my eye. You still with the nonprofit? Still advising them part-time, I said. I've been working on some personal projects too. Lauren leaned her elbow on the table. She's always got a few things going, she said. Like a portfolio of hobbies. The smile on my face tightened. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I stood slowly and reached for the kettle on the sideboard. Would anyone like more tea? No one answered. A few half smiles, a shake of the head. Lauren, still poised with her wine glass, said, We can bring out the pie soon if you're ready. I'm fine, I said. Actually, I was thinking I might show everyone something first. Her back stiffened. Not a lot, just a small shift. But I caught it. Nathan looked over, curious. What kind of something? Just a little surprise, I said, setting my tea down. A thank you. For the invitation. Lauren's father straightened in his chair. You didn't have to bring anything, Eleanor. I didn't, I said, reaching into my bag again. But sometimes the truth is its own kind of gift. I let the words hang in the air for a moment, just long enough for Lauren to turn toward me fully, her smile fading into something flatter, something more alert. Then I placed the red folder gently on the table. Not open, not exposed, just present. Lauren stared at it like it might bite. What is that? I sat down again, calm, still, my tea barely rippling in its cup. Nothing you don't already know, I said. For a beat, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock above the fireplace and the faint shifting of chairs. Nathan looked between us, eyes narrowing. Lauren? He asked. She laughed, but it came out thin. I'm sure it's nothing. I reached forward, rested my hand gently on the folder. I'll let everyone decide that for themselves. Then I looked up at her and said, low and steady, but I wouldn't cut the pie just yet. The silence stretched like elastic. I could feel it tightening around the room, taut and invisible, threatening to snap. Lauren tried to speak first, to reassert control. I really don't think I do, I said. My voice was even, deliberate. I think I should clarify something about the plates. She froze, wine glass suspended midair. Across the table, Nathan leaned forward, eyebrows drawn together. What about the plates? I turned my gaze to him, not accusing, not soft, just steady. They were purchased last spring, crate and barrel, online order. Total was $624.19. The card used was mine, ending in 0832. Lauren's mother blinked. Her father shifted in his chair. Nathan looked confused. Wait, your card? Lauren laughed, too loudly. She's mistaken, she said quickly, a brittle edge to her voice. I used her account once, years ago, for a diaper order. It was a temporary thing. She said I could. I nodded. That's true. I did. I reached over, opened the red folder with a crisp flick of my fingers. The receipts lay neatly inside, protected in clear sleeves. I slid the top one forward, just slightly, enough for the words to catch the light. But that charge wasn't diapers, I added. It was a homeware order, placed from your laptop, your shipping address, my billing. I looked back at Nathan. You told me the plates were beautiful. I'm glad. I picked them out too. Lauren's wine glass touched the table a little too hard. Nathan looked between us. So, you paid for them? Paid for. Shipped. Never reimbursed, I said. At least not in full. Lauren's father cleared his throat. This doesn't sound like something to make a fuss over, Eleanor. I'm not fussing, I said softly. I'm clarifying, since there was some confusion. Pat, sitting 2 seats down and pretending to scroll through her phone, shot me a quick glance, approval in her eyes. Then, without lifting her head, she started quietly typing. Recording impressions, noting reactions. She was good at that. Nathan turned to Lauren. You told me you bought those after the remodeling. You said you wanted something that felt grown up. Lauren's lips parted, but no sound came. For once, she didn't have a version ready. I let the moment settle. It's a small thing, really, but small things add up. Her cheeks flushed. Eleanor, this is ridiculous. We've always shared things. You practically lived here. I did, I said. I loved your daughter. I washed your dishes. I covered groceries and daycare when you said your clients were late to pay. I picked up my tea again. But I stopped living here when you stopped seeing me, and I stopped sharing when you started taking. The room had gone stone still. Even her mother, normally a one-woman symphony of polite affirmations, said nothing. Victor's name lit up my phone again. Victor, you're on solid ground. If she escalates, we press forward. But for now, stay calm. You've landed the first blow. Lauren finally snapped. Why are you doing this now? What's your point? To embarrass me in front of my parents? No, I said. You did that yourself. When you bragged about something you didn't buy, didn't pay for, and never admitted borrowing. I'm just the mirror. Nathan pushed back from the table slightly like he needed distance. Lauren, is that true? She stood too abruptly. Her napkin dropped to the floor. This is insane. You're both being dramatic. Pat lifted her eyes, cool and measured. Actually, she said gently, it's just numbers, and dates, and facts. You can call it what you want, but the charge is on record. I've seen it. Lauren turned to her voice sharp. You're siding with her now? I'm not siding, Pat said, still calm. I'm observing. And so far, what I've observed is someone trying very hard not to be accountable. Lauren's jaw tightened. Then, to everyone's surprise, Nathan spoke again. Quieter now. Why didn't you just say something earlier, Lauren? Why let me think? He trailed off. His eyes were on the table, but I could see it. Something small cracking in him. A quiet kind of disillusionment. Lauren's voice dropped. An attempt at regaining composure. It was a favor. She knew I'd pay her back eventually. Eventually's a funny word, I murmured, for a woman who blocked my texts 6 months ago. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off with a final, even tone. You built this whole dinner on a lie, Lauren. I just pulled one thread. Imagine what's waiting in the seams. And with that, I closed the red folder slowly, like a curtain drawing down on the first act. The pie sat untouched in the kitchen. No one moved. Outside, a storm had started tapping against the windows, soft but insistent. The kind of storm that doesn't pass quickly. The first laugh came from Lauren's mother. Soft, nervous. A brittle little chime that cracked the silence like glass. Oh, well, she said, folding her napkin slowly. These things happen. Then came another laugh. Deeper, more genuine, from someone near the far end of the table. One of the peripheral guests. An old friend of Lauren's father, I think. That's a good one, he chuckled, pointing toward the plates. You should hang on to those, Eleanor. They might appreciate in value now. Laughter rippled across the table, polite, uncertain, eager for a release valve. The way people laugh when they're not sure what side of history they're on yet. Lauren didn't laugh. Her jaw was tight, her eyes fixed on the closed folder like she was waiting for it to reopen itself. Her hand hovered over her wine glass, fingers twitching slightly, but she didn't lift it. Nathan did laugh. A single huff, sharp and bitter. She never told me, he said quietly. Not once. Lauren turned toward him fast. Nathan. He held up his hand. You didn't even mention she loaned you money. You just rewrote it. I didn't rewrite. You presented it as yours, he said. Not angry, just bewildered. That whole story about picking them out yourself, how important it was to you. You even told Sophie it was your first real adult purchase. Lauren flushed deeper. It was? I mean, does it matter who swiped the card? I chose them. Nathan let out a soft, incredulous breath. You didn't swipe the card, Lauren. You borrowed it. And then ghosted the person who did. Across the table, I picked up my tea again. Calm. Composed. Satisfied in the quiet way that lives just behind the ribcage. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The room was doing it for me. Lauren's mother cleared her throat. We don't need to dissect every detail. It's Thanksgiving after all. Pat leaned forward slightly, chin resting in her palm. Exactly. And what better day to reflect on what we're thankful for, like clarity, and finally understanding who paid for dinnerware. A few more stifled chuckles. Even Lauren's father exhaled through his nose like he was suppressing a smirk. Lauren's fingers gripped the edge of the table now. Her smile, tight, wrong, was pasted on like makeup after midnight. Victor, who'd moved to the buffet with his phone, turned to me. I backed up the transaction logs and attached screenshots to the cloud folder, in case the story changes later. I nodded. Good. He tapped a few final notes into his phone and slid it back into his pocket. Then, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, he reached for a cheese biscuit and asked, Do we know what kind of pie's in the kitchen? I saw something with a lattice top. Apple, I said, still watching Lauren out of the corner of my eye. I brought it. Lauren blinked. You baked? Bought, I said. But paid for. Pat smiled into her wine glass. Nathan pushed his chair back slowly, as if needing space to process. You know, I always wondered why you two stopped talking. Lauren's head whipped toward him. Don't start. He shook his head. No, I mean, I always asked. You said Eleanor got busy, pulled away. I did, I said. After you both stopped replying to my messages. After Lauren accidentally canceled the babysitting arrangement and then unfriended me on every platform. Lauren looked like she wanted to disappear. Her voice shrank. I didn't mean to ghost. It was just a lot at the time. And I became convenient to forget? I asked, still gentle. After the help stopped being helpful? Nathan looked at me. And I saw it. Really saw it. That flicker behind his eyes. He was connecting dots I didn't even have to draw. The Lauren he thought he married and the Lauren sitting across from him now were splitting apart in real time. It was Pat who saved her. Or maybe just changed the subject before anything else could unravel. She leaned toward me, warm and wry. If you have the energy, I'd say open the folder after dessert. People digest better when they're chewing. Lauren stood abruptly. Excuse me. She moved fast, too fast, grabbing her wine glass and disappearing down the hallway. A door clicked softly behind her. The bathroom, probably, or the guest room. Somewhere she could breathe where no one could watch her do it. Nathan sat frozen for a moment, then reached across the table. "Can I see the folder?" I looked at him, not for permission, but for motive. His expression was different now, unsettled, a little bruised, but clear. "I just want to see the rest," he said. "Please." I slid it across. He opened it slowly, and as the pages turned, his jaw tightened. And that was the moment. Not when the receipts were revealed, not when the table laughed, but when Nathan didn't. Nathan hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. He just kept flipping through the folder, page after page, his expression tightening like a knot pulled too far. I didn't interrupt. I let the paper speak for me. Pat leaned back in her chair, her gaze on Lauren's empty seat. "She's taking her time." "She's regrouping," I said. "She always does." From the far end of the room, Sophie Kim entered quietly through the kitchen door. She nodded once, discreet, calm, and walked over like she belonged here. She didn't sit. Just rested one hand lightly on the back of my chair. "I checked everything again," she said under her breath. "Bank access, shared logins, delivery confirmations. It's all backed up and time-stamped." I nodded. "And the accounts?" "Secure," she said. "I had the last remaining joint payment authorization removed this morning. She can't charge anything to you anymore." Across the table, Victor's ears perked up. He crossed the room, phone in hand. "Wait, did she try to move something today?" Sophie lifted an eyebrow. "She tried to update the shipping address for the restoration hardware order. Her card didn't process, so it defaulted to Eleanor's." "She what?" Pat muttered. Victor opened his email and scrolled fast, then looked up. "Confirmed. I got the alert 20 minutes ago. I just hadn't seen it yet." I tilted my head slightly, unsurprised. "Did the system flag it?" "Automatically declined," Sophie said. "And I froze the link between your Amazon and Venmo accounts while I was at it, just in case." "Good," I said. I felt it then. Not relief exactly, but something sturdier. Control. The kind that doesn't rely on the room's approval. Just quiet, factual ownership. The folder sat beside me like a sealed chapter, but I wasn't holding it anymore. Nathan looked up from the pages, his brow furrowed. "Wait, are you saying she's still trying to access your stuff?" "Trying," I said, "but not succeeding." His eyes darted toward the hallway, the closed door. A long pause followed. Then, "She said the accounts were disconnected months ago." "She told me that too," I said. "After she used my Chase card to book her client's rental car." He blinked. Victor stepped closer. "Everything we found is above board, tracked, documented. We're not speculating here, Nathan. We're confirming." Nathan opened his mouth, closed it. He looked overwhelmed, but not in the way that makes someone freeze. This was the kind that makes someone recalculate. He pushed the folder slightly away, as if it burned now. Sophie checked her phone again. "I also ran a quick scan on any known business aliases attached to her name. Found 2 LLCs listed under her maiden name and a defunct EIN registered to your home address." Nathan's face went pale. "That's not possible." "It is," Sophie said gently, "and it's traceable." Pat crossed her arms, not smug, not even pleased, just tired. "She built a whole ecosystem of you," she said quietly to me, "and then erased you from it." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The facts were out now, speaking louder than I ever could. Lauren reappeared in the doorway. Her lipstick had been reapplied, but too heavily. Her blouse was smoothed, her wine glass refilled. Everything about her looked reassembled, but nothing aligned. She clocked Sophie immediately. "You brought her?" "She's a friend," I said. Lauren looked at Nathan, who didn't meet her eyes. She turned to me instead, voice thin but sharpened. You always did love a team. Always needed people to prop you up. No, I said. I just finally stopped letting you stand on my shoulders. Her eyes narrowed. If this is some ploy for sympathy, it's not. I cut in. It's closure, with witnesses. Sophie's phone buzzed softly. She glanced down. She just attempted a password reset on a shared streaming login, she said, then looked up. On her way down the hall. Lauren's mouth opened, closed. Even now she was still reaching, still grabbing onto the edges of a system that no longer answered to her. Nathan stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. Lauren, he said slowly, what else have you been lying about? She didn't answer. Victor stepped forward, tone even. It's best you stop trying to access accounts that don't belong to you. It's no longer a misunderstanding. It's a pattern. Lauren's voice was barely audible. You're making this into something it's not. Victor didn't blink. We're documenting what it already is. She turned to me one last time. So what? Now you're the victim? I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap. No, just the owner of everything you swore was yours. And then I smiled. Not wide, not cruel. Just enough for her to see I wasn't afraid anymore. Lauren sat back down like someone forced into it. Slow, stiff, spine too straight to be casual. She clutched her wine glass like a lifeline, but the stem was trembling slightly between her fingers. I stayed seated, composed. Calm had taken root in me, not the performative kind, but the kind that settles in your bones after surviving something that should have broken you. Nathan still hadn't said much. His hands were folded tightly in front of him, jaw locked, eyes darting between the folder and Lauren like he was trying to line up two versions of the same story, and realizing only one of them ever made sense. I leaned forward, just slightly, not for effect, just enough to meet the moment. You know, I said softly, I've been thinking a lot about etiquette. Lauren blinked. Excuse me? In a shared home, I went on, where people give and take and host and help. There's a rhythm, a balance. I turned to Nathan. Do you remember when you both went out of town and asked me to house sit while the floors were being redone? Nathan nodded, still confused. Yeah, you took care of everything. I stayed in the guest room, restocked the fridge, even arranged your pantry so your daughter could reach her snacks without dragging a stool. I smiled faintly. But I never touched the master bedroom. I never opened a drawer that wasn't mine, not once. The room was quiet again, not tense, just still, listening. Lauren rolled her eyes. This isn't about floors or snacks. It's about respect, I said, my voice firmer now. The difference between being welcome and being used. Pat gave the smallest nod of agreement beside me, her lips tight with something halfway between admiration and secondhand rage. I reached for the folder again, opening it. Not dramatically, just methodically. You didn't just borrow money, Lauren. You rearranged my life to fit inside yours, quietly, sloppily. I slid a new page across the table, this one with highlighted transactions. Furniture, subscriptions, a hotel bill. Nathan's eyes locked on the hotel name. She told me that was a client retreat, he said, voice low. Said it was comped. He looked to Lauren. You made me Venmo you the pet sitter fee. Lauren didn't speak. Victor moved around the table, taking out a clean envelope from his briefcase. He placed it beside the receipts. These are notarized declarations of financial separation, dating back 16 months, all state-reviewed and time-stamped, just in case you attempt further disputes. Lauren stared at the envelope like it might explode. I reached into my purse and pulled out one last item, a photo, folded once. I opened it and placed it in front of her. It was her daughter, my goddaughter. Smiling on a swing I paid for in a backyard I used to rake leaves in while Lauren sat upstairs, on deadline. Her daughter used to call me Nora. Couldn't say Eleanor yet. I never wanted to be thanked for what I gave you, I said quietly, but I won't be erased by it either. No one moved. The guests, still seated, had gone mute, unsure if they should be embarrassed for her or just relieved it wasn't them. Lauren's face hardened. This isn't your family. I know, I said, but for a while you made me think I was. Pat reached for her wine glass again, speaking just loud enough. We always think we're family until the bill comes. Sophie, still near the kitchen, added softly. Or the credit statement. Nathan shifted again. Not aggressively, just far enough from Lauren to make space between them obvious. I think we should have a conversation later, he said to her. She looked at him, but his eyes were already somewhere else. Victor gathered the loose documents neatly into the folder. As of this morning, all shared access has been revoked. No accounts remain that tie you two financially. Consider yourselves untangled. Except for this room, Pat added, tone cool. That'll take a bit longer. Lauren stood again. Slower this time. No drama. Just a woman trying to disappear without anyone watching her leave. She turned to me at the last second. You did all this? For what? So they'd like you more than me? I shook my head. No. So they'd finally see who you are without me. And for the first time all night, she had no comeback, just silence. I took a long breath and let my shoulders relax. I hadn't noticed I was holding them so high. The air felt lighter somehow, the storm outside softening into a distant hum. Victor checked his watch. I'm stepping outside to make a call. Let me know when you're ready for the next phase. Nathan looked up sharply. Next phase? Victor just smiled, and I turned to Nathan, calm and level. We should talk, I said. And this time, he nodded. The tea was steeped and poured before anyone realized I'd left the room. I needed the quiet, the weight of porcelain in my hand, the steam curling against the window above the sink. It was the kind of silence I used to find only in borrowed spaces, behind closed doors. Now, it was mine again. Earned. I returned to the dining room with a silver tray, one I bought years ago for Lauren's engagement party, though she always insisted it came from her aunt. Chamomile and Earl Grey, I said, setting it gently between the remaining guests. There's honey and cream if you want. They murmured thank yous, grateful to have something to do with their hands. Lauren sat curled near the end of the table, her eyes distant, jaw clenched. She hadn't spoken since the folder closed. No protest, no apology. Just the quiet churn of someone recalibrating their place in the room and finding there wasn't one. Pat leaned toward me as I passed her cup. This is impressive, she murmured. You didn't just reclaim your time, you reclaimed the narrative. I didn't want revenge, I said. Just clarity. You got both, she said, gracefully. Across from us, Nathan cradled his tea like a man who'd just remembered what warmth felt like. His expression had softened, not toward Lauren, but toward the woman he hadn't been willing to see clearly until now. My mom would have handled it the same way, he said quietly. With facts, not fury. I glanced at him, surprised. She hated drama, he added, but she believed in consequences, and tea. I smiled faintly. Smart woman. He nodded, then looked across the table again, at Lauren, who still hadn't touched her cup. Victor stepped in from the hallway, phone in hand. Estate assets are confirmed clean, he said, addressing me. No new liabilities. You're fully protected. Pat raised an eyebrow. Estate assets? Eleanor's trust, Victor said casually. She's expanding it. Pat looked at me. You didn't mention that. I will, I said. Soon. The room grew still again, but not in tension. Just awareness. The dynamic had shifted. Not by force, not by shouting, just by presence. For years, Lauren had spun circles fast enough to make everyone dizzy, managing optics, stories, emotional loyalties. But tonight, she wasn't spinning. She was still. And being still was exposing. I took the seat across from her. Not confrontational, just measured. I'm setting up a fund, I said aloud, for transitional housing support. Women who leave shared households with nothing because someone else held the accounts, the leases, the name on the title. Lauren looked up finally. Her voice was low and sharp. You're turning this into a mission statement? No, I said. I'm turning it into something useful. Something you taught me, even if you didn't mean to. She scoffed. That's rich. Victor didn't flinch. That's solvency. Sophie, who'd returned from the kitchen, gave a quiet nod. We've already drafted the proposal. Name pending. Pat looked at me with a different kind of smile now. Not pity, not even pride. Something closer to respect. You turned her theft into policy. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I just stopped mistaking civility for silence. Lauren stood abruptly, but this time there was no drama, no speech, just the quiet scrape of her chair against the hardwood. Good luck with your little fund, she muttered. You'll need it. I watched her walk toward the front door. No one followed. Not even Nathan. And when the door clicked closed behind her, the storm outside had stopped. The house was still again, but in a different way. Less like tension, more like peace. Nathan looked at me. You're really doing all this? I already did, I said. Now I'm just putting it to use. He opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it. Maybe there were no words left. Or maybe there were too many. I stood and collected the teacups, moving slowly through the room, feeling every inch of it, how it used to belong to her, and now didn't. As I reached the kitchen, Pat called after me. And what about dessert? I paused in the doorway, turned halfway back. Maybe next time, I said. Tonight feels full enough. The next morning, I found 3 messages waiting in my inbox before I'd even finished my coffee. Subject, that was masterful. From Cheryl G., PTA Chair. Message, I was there last night. I didn't say anything, but I watched everything. Thank you. You reminded a lot of us what real composure looks like. 2 more followed. Quiet, careful, congratulatory. One from a parent I hadn't spoken to since the school fundraiser 3 years ago. Another from a woman I barely knew, but who had clearly been watching Lauren's performance from the wings for just as long. I read them slowly, standing by the window of the guest house Pat had lent me for the weekend. The silence was a different kind now. Earned, expansive. Pat appeared with 2 mugs and her usual dry smile. You made the rounds, she said, handing me one. Even Marcia whispered about you on her way out. That woman hasn't whispered since the Clinton administration. I took the mug, let the warmth bleed into my hands. They didn't say anything in the moment. They didn't have to, Pat said. They saw it. The way you kept your voice even. The way she came apart without a single raised word from you. She paused. That's not just good manners. That's strategy. Outside, the sun filtered through the wet leaves. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean, and for the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Victor arrived just after 10, briefcase in hand. "We filed the fund paperwork this morning," he said as he stepped inside. "It's real now. The transitional support account is live." I blinked. "Already?" "You said you were ready," he said. "So we treated it like you were." He handed me a slim folder, blue this time, instead of red. Inside, the name, the mission, the legal structure. A beginning. "I've left a line item for community grants," Victor added. "You've got enough discretionary room to do something symbolic." "Like what?" I asked. "Like buying back your time," Pat offered. "Or someone else's." I didn't answer, but I knew what she meant. By noon, the buzz had started moving beyond the house. A photo someone had taken during tea, me in the center of the table, pouring chamomile like a diplomat, ended up on a community blog under the headline, "Grace Under Fire, Thanksgiving's Most Composed Exit." The piece didn't name Lauren. It didn't need to. It only spoke of entitlement quietly dismantled and dignity in the face of revisionist memory. The kind of writing that comes from someone watching their own reflection in someone else's conflict. Nathan called around too. "I read it," he said, no preamble. "The blog post, the quotes, the fundraiser page." I didn't respond. "I just wanted to say, you didn't have to do all of that, not for us." "I didn't," I said. "I did it because I needed to get out of the story she kept writing me into." A pause. Then, "She's still blaming you." "She always will," I said, "because otherwise she'd have to admit I helped her more than she helped herself." He was quiet a beat longer, then softer. "You made your point." "No," I said. "I made my peace." He didn't call again that day. Later that evening, a knock came at Pat's door. It was one of the older guests from the dinner. Lauren's father's colleague. Polite, blazer in hand, eyes warm but hesitant. "I just wanted to say," he began, "that I've watched that girl talk her way out of more than she should have. But last night, you didn't let her." I nodded. "I wasn't there to trap her. I was there to stop being trapped." "Well," he said, "you did it. Subtly, but thoroughly." He handed me a business card. "If the fund needs a donor list, let me know." After he left, I stood at the window again. A different kind of storm was coming. Not dramatic, not destructive. Just change. Sophie called around 9. "You know it's starting to spread, right?" she said. "The recognition. People are calling it the dinner reset." I smiled. "Sounds dramatic." "Not to the women messaging me," she said. "They want to know how you did it, how you waited, how you didn't explode." "Because I knew she wanted that," I said. "She was counting on it." Sophie paused. "You made being quiet look like power." I laughed. Really laughed this time. It was power. Outside, the lights in Lauren's house, 2 blocks away, were still on, but dim, probably for show. I didn't need them to go out. I just didn't want them bleeding into my windows anymore. As I turned off my lamp, my phone buzzed one last time. A new message from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but it's not over." No name, no sign-off. But I didn't need one. I didn't respond to the message. Not because I was afraid, though for a moment I felt the familiar flicker of it, but because fear was what she wanted. The text wasn't a threat. It was a plea, disguised as defiance. One last grasp at control from a woman who no longer held the reins. The next morning, I met Victor at his office downtown. The building was all glass and quiet, the kind of place where the noise stayed out on the street. and everything inside moved with precision. We sat across from each other in a small conference room while he opened a secured file on his laptop. "Everything's finalized," he said, sliding the screen slightly toward me. "Your personal trust now includes a stipulation that no shared household purchases, past or future, can be linked to third-party claims unless contractually documented." I scanned the screen. "So, nothing can be disputed?" "Not unless she fakes a receipt, and even then, good luck," Victor said. "We've isolated all active accounts, flagged your credit report for unusual activity, and blocked access from any device not authenticated by you personally." I leaned back, letting the words settle in. "No more plates," I said quietly. "No more disappearing Venmo requests. No more calls from Chase asking about shared vacation charges I never agreed to." Victor nodded. "She can try, but the walls are up now." I stared at the screen a second longer, then closed the laptop. "Good." Pat joined us 10 minutes later, 2 lattes in hand and that amused look she wore whenever the truth finally caught up with the noise. "Lauren emailed me," she said as she passed me a cup. "Subject line, misunderstanding. Body. A paragraph of vague emotional bait and a line about how she's been unfairly portrayed." I raised an eyebrow. "Did she ask for a donation?" "Not directly," Pat said, taking a long sip. "But she included a link to her new consulting site, built last night. One of those glossy Squarespace templates with placeholder testimonials still showing." Victor didn't laugh, but his eyebrows lifted. "Desperate move." "She's trying to reframe," I said. "Shift the narrative." "She's trying to rebuild something she never learned to build in the first place," Pat replied. "Without access, it won't last." And that was the difference now. Access. Not just to my finances, but to my time, my name, my willingness to be useful in a world where usefulness had always been quietly demanded and rarely acknowledged. "She'll try to find another version of me," I said. "Someone newer, easier to impress, less suspicious." "She will," Victor agreed. "But eventually, people stop handing her their passwords." We left the office around noon, the air crisp and bright. I hadn't checked the community blog again. Hadn't needed to, but I knew the post was still circulating. Quietly, intentionally. Not to ruin Lauren, but to protect the next woman in her orbit. That afternoon, back at the guest house, I pulled out my folder, now blue, not red, and began reviewing my remaining assets. A small coastal property I'd forgotten I still co-owned with my aunt. An investment account I'd ignored since the nonprofit job. A string of art donations I'd made years ago in Lauren's name, when I still believed that elevating her meant we both rose. Funny how little those gifts meant now. Pat watched from the armchair, her reading glasses pushed halfway down her nose. "You really gave her a lot." "I did," I said, scanning a line item that made my stomach twist. "Even gave her credit for the library grant. Remember that?" "Yep," Pat said. "She told everyone she brokered it. Said it was the first time she felt like a real player." I nodded. "She told me that too, after taking 20% of the payout and never showing up to the board meeting." I took a breath and moved on. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Sophie. She handed me a printed summary of my portfolio with her usual efficiency and a quiet glance that said more than the paper did. "She's trying again," Sophie said. "Where?" I asked. "She emailed a vendor using your old shared Gmail. Said she was co-director of the fund." Pat laughed without looking up. "She's not even subtle anymore." Victor, who'd returned from a call, leaned in. Don't worry, we've scrubbed every back-end system. From now on, the only name on those files is yours. I nodded, but something tugged at me. That message from the night before, the way it was worded. You think you've won, but it's not over. It wasn't just a tantrum, it was a warning, or maybe a signal. That night, while everyone else ate dinner and I sat in the quiet with my tea, another message came through. This time it wasn't anonymous. From Lauren Hale. Subject: custody. Just that. No greeting, no context, no fluff. And suddenly, the air in the room shifted, because she wasn't talking about finances anymore. The word custody stayed in my mind all night. It sat there, heavy and echoing, too sharp to ignore, too vague to react to. Custody of what? Not her daughter, not property. It was a word meant to unnerve, to remind me she could still reach into the calm I'd built and knock something loose. By morning, I knew what to do. Victor met me at the cafe across from the courthouse. Neutral territory. The kind of place where everyone spoke quietly, as if afraid of spilling secrets with their coffee. She's bluffing, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Custody is a word that sounds powerful but means nothing without standing. And she doesn't have it anymore. Not legally, not financially. I know, I said, resting my fingers on the envelope. That's why we're going to change what she's fighting for. He tilted his head. Meaning? I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet. The finalized transfer authorization from my trust, signed and ready. Meaning, I'm reallocating half the remaining discretionary funds to charity, effective immediately. Victor blinked. That's decisive. She built her life pretending generosity was ownership, I said. I'd rather make ownership into generosity. Pat arrived a few minutes later, dropping into the chair beside me. You look lighter, she said, which either means you slept or you've made a move. Both, I said, handing her the copy. I'm setting up the first round of grants from the fund: community education, women's advocacy, transitional housing, all causes she once claimed to care about. Pat's eyebrows lifted. You're making her legacy irrelevant. Untouchable, I corrected. By the time we reached Victor's office, he'd already contacted the Financial Oversight Board to expedite the filings. Every allocation would be public record, visible, transparent, unassailable. If Lauren tried to cry theft, she'd be shouting into a void filled with receipts. When the last signature was inked, Victor leaned back. She can't contest these. You've locked it in. She'll still try, I said. That's what she does. Pat smirked. And every time she does, she proves your point. That evening, a small reception was held in the community hall, something Victor had arranged quietly through one of the foundation partners. It wasn't glamorous, no photographers, just a handful of local donors, board members, and a few guests who'd been at that dinner weeks before. When I arrived, the air carried that faint mix of paper cups, citrus candles, and quiet admiration. The kind of event built on sincerity rather than spectacle. Pat guided me through the crowd, murmuring introductions. They know who you are, she whispered. They're just pretending not to. At the front of the room, a poster displayed the new fund logo, the Hale Price Initiative for Equitable Homes. Pat caught my expression. Yes, I included her name, she said before I could speak. Strategic compassion. Optics matter. I smiled faintly. It'll eat her alive. Victor took the podium briefly to confirm the legal endowment details. Every number, every decimal accounted for. He was concise, professional, and unflinching. The allocations are permanent, he said, fully protected, and distributed under sole trustee authority. When he stepped down, polite applause followed. The sound wasn't loud, but it was genuine. I stood off to the side, hands clasped loosely, scanning the room. And that's when I saw him. Nathan, near the back wall. He hadn't come forward, hadn't spoken, but the moment our eyes met, I knew why he was there. When the crowd thinned, he approached. "You actually did it," he said quietly. "You turned all of it, everything she weaponized, into something good." "It was the only way to neutralize her," I said. "Redirect the story before she could rewrite it." He nodded slowly. "You know, my mom used to say power's only real if you don't have to announce it." "She was right," I said. "And Lauren's been announcing it her whole life." Nathan exhaled, looking around at the banners, the paperwork, the people shaking hands. "She doesn't stand a chance now." "She'll find another fight," I said. "She always does." Pat joined us, a glass of sparkling water in hand. "Then let her," she said. "While she's busy fighting, you'll be too busy funding." Victor returned a moment later with his phone. "Press picked it up," he said, showing me the headline. "From conflict to contribution, the woman who turned betrayal into a foundation." Pat grinned. "I told you optics matter." The guests clinked their glasses softly. A quiet toast. I smiled, nodded my thanks, and for the first time in months, felt the room tilt back toward balance. Lauren wasn't there, of course, but her absence was its own applause. As the crowd began to leave, Victor placed one more folder in front of me. "Everything's airtight now," he said. "Financial, legal, reputational. You've preserved what she spent years trying to dilute." I nodded. "Good." Then he hesitated. "There's just one thing." I looked up. "What?" He turned his phone around again, this time showing an email. From Lauren Hale. Subject: formal notice. Custody petition filed. It wasn't assets she was after. It was her daughter. Pat's voice broke the quiet. Oh, hell. The hum of the hall dimmed around me, every conversation fading into a distant blur. I closed my eyes, steadying the breath that suddenly felt heavier. Because the one thing Lauren still had access to wasn't a password or a bank account. It was blood. We didn't cancel the gathering. Pat asked me 3 times. Once on the ride back from the reception, once over tea that night, and once again the next morning as I reviewed the finalized custody petition on Victor's screen. Each time I answered the same way: we host. Because this wasn't a party. It was a message. We kept it small. No photographers, no public invitations, just 12 people who mattered. Colleagues, partners, a former foundation trustee, a retired family law judge. The kind of people who understood power not because it was shouted, but because they'd seen how quietly it could move when used well. The garden was trimmed. The table was set with the plates. The plates. Not because I needed to remind anyone, but because they belonged here now, unapologetically. Victor arrived first, briefcase in hand. He glanced once around the space, then set the leather case on the patio side table like he'd done it 100 times. "I reviewed the petition," he said. "It's theater. Her signature's real, but there's no basis. No parental standing, no shared custody precedent, no legal claim that could survive 5 minutes in front of a judge." "And yet," I said, "she filed." "Which means she wants a headline," he said, not looking away from me. "Not a child." That was the difference. I had proximity. I had trust. I'd been there at every doctor's appointment, school recital, scraped knee. She had biology, and not much else. "She's playing the long game," Pat said, joining us with a tray of lemon water and linen napkins. But she forgot. You wrote the rules for long games. I set down the place cards quietly. There were no titles, no roles, just names. People who mattered, seated with intent. Lauren wasn't invited. Nathan was. He arrived on time, alone. He gave a soft, silent nod as he walked through the gate and handed me a bottle of wine, unwrapped. A gesture that felt almost too small for the weight he carried into the space. She told me about the filing, he said under his breath. I'm not here to take sides. You're here because you already did, I said. He didn't argue. He sat down near the end of the table, hands folded, quiet, watchful. By the time dessert was served, just fruit and honeyed biscuits, the atmosphere had settled into something close to reverence. Nothing loud, nothing triumphant, just calm, intentional. Victor waited until the last bite was done before clearing his throat gently. I'd like to confirm, he said without standing, that all estate documentation, custodial declarations, and supplemental legal filings are in place. As of this morning, Ms. Price retains full discretionary rights over all charitable assets, intellectual properties, and any guardianship considerations legally filed under her name. The guests murmured softly, not surprised, but impressed. Nathan looked up sharply. Guardianship? He said. Victor only nodded. It was Pat who clarified, her voice calm. Eleanor filed as godparent with standing years ago. Multiple declarations from both of them, back when Lauren still knew what gratitude was. Nathan looked stunned. I didn't know. No, Pat said, sipping her water. You weren't supposed to. Across the table, one of the guests, a retired juvenile court judge, spoke for the first time. Smart to refresh the filings this year, she said. I've seen blood parents try to claw back what they never bothered to earn. Courts are slower now, but not blind. The comment wasn't pointed, but it didn't have to be. The next hour moved like silk. Laughter, shared stories. A few meaningful glances from people who'd once doubted me, now quietly repositioning their loyalties. Lauren's absence didn't need explanation. Her silence was the loudest guest of all. After the last glass was collected and the table cleared, I stood for a moment on the stone path outside the garden, watching the guests retreat to their cars like drifting candles. Victor stepped beside me. She'll see it, he said. The guest list, the photos, the judge. She was never the audience, I said. He glanced at me. Then who was? Myself, I said. 10 months ago, the woman who thought being useful was the only way to be kept. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Pat appeared at my side, arms folded, head tilted slightly. You know this isn't her last move. I know, I said, but I'm not her counter anymore. I'm her mirror. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I expected another jab, another escalation. But this time, it wasn't her. From Nathan Hale. Subject, dinner, body. Just the two of us. No agenda, just truth. I think I finally understand what I didn't see. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the quiet wrapping itself around me again. Not heavy, just full. I didn't respond right away, because this time I got to decide what silence meant. The story didn't end with a bang. It folded in quietly, like a page turned without ceremony, but not without weight. 2 weeks after the garden gathering, the blog updated its post. Not with fanfare, just a footnote. Update. The Hale Price Initiative has officially been recognized by the State Housing Council for its early impact on transitional support efforts. We stand by our coverage of the woman who turned quiet betrayal into structured change. No names, no photos, just the facts. That's what I had always wanted anyway. Lauren's countersuit never materialized. Victor had buried it before it had the chance to breathe. He called it legal preemptive oxygen deprivation, his term, not mine. When the custody petition was dismissed, the judge's ruling was as clinical as it was damning. No standing, no cohabitation, no historical investment in care. In a single paragraph, the years Lauren had tried to rewrite were returned to me, sealed and indexed. Nathan didn't argue. He didn't celebrate either. He called once, left a voicemail I never returned. Something about apologies, about not knowing how deep it went, about wishing he'd looked closer. I played it twice, then deleted it. Not in anger, just finality. Some echoes weren't worth preserving. Victor brought the confirmation paperwork over himself. "Everything's airtight," he said, laying down the envelope like a doctor placing a chart. "Your trust is secured, the fund is protected, and there's now a clause in place that prevents Lauren from ever attaching her name to your estate. No memoirs, no interviews, no ghost-written essays about emotional investments." I raised an eyebrow. "Clause 17 on 4, he said. "Silence is finally enforceable." I laughed then. Really laughed. The kind that started low in the chest and took its time. Victor only smiled. "You earned this. Every inch of it." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "I did." Pat joined me later that afternoon. We sat on the back porch, watching the wind comb through the garden. She brought wine. I brought the old receipts. One last look before they were archived. "You really never wanted revenge?" she asked. "I wanted something longer lasting," I said. "Revenge is loud. It burns fast. I wanted erosion." She gave a slow smile. "Well, sweetheart, you didn't just erode the foundation. You replaced it." She clinked her glass gently against mine. "To peaceful takeovers." I didn't drink right away. I looked out at the yard. The swing Lauren's daughter used to play on had been repainted. Sky blue now. The leaves were turning. There was no storm on the horizon, just October, settling in. The community had shifted too. I felt it in the way people looked at me now. Less like a shadow in Lauren's story, more like the author of my own. At the next board meeting, the chair offered to nominate me as vice president of the fund. I declined. "I'd rather stay in the field," I said. "That's where the work is." Behind me, someone whispered, "She always was the engine." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to know who said it. Even Lauren's old friends had gone quiet. Her influence didn't vanish. It dimmed. Dignified disinterest. The kind of absence that no public apology or curated Instagram caption could reverse. She still tried, of course. A podcast interview. A blurry photo with her daughter in the background. A post about emotional labor that was so vaguely phrased it could have been about a barista or a breakup. But people weren't listening anymore, because when the light shifted, so did the shape of her story. One morning, I sat down with a legal pad, not to draft anything new, just to write something I hadn't let myself write before. What did I learn? It wasn't about control, not really, or even boundaries. It was about patience, the slow kind, the kind that waits longer than anyone expects, that plans 3 exits ahead, that smiles while holding the door open because it knows whose name is on the deed. That evening, Victor texted one line. "Victor, everything's locked. You're unassailable now." I read it once, then again. I didn't reply, because power doesn't always answer. And legacy? Legacy waits. But just as I reached to turn off the lamp, another message came through. From unknown. Subject: she's coming back. Just that. No attachments, no explanation. Just a signal. Because erosion may be slow, but some things don't stay buried. Not forever. The tea was warm. Not just the temperature, but the moment. Steeped, not rushed. Mint leaves, a slice of lemon, and no emails for once. Just quiet. Pat sat across from me in the garden, legs crossed, her blouse fluttering in the breeze like a flag raised half in victory, half in warning. She didn't say much, just sipped her tea like she'd been waiting for this afternoon her whole life. Maybe she had. Feels different, she said finally, voice low. It is, I said, pouring my second cup. No fire alarms, no receipts to print, no one texting at midnight because she forgot. Who paid for what? She smiled. And no one asking you to host but never calling it yours. I met her gaze. Exactly. The garden was quiet save for the bees and the faint chime of wind through the bamboo. Victor had arrived earlier, checked the filings, reviewed the updates, then slipped away with the same discretion he always carried. Not because he wasn't proud, but because there was nothing left to fix. Everything was airtight now. Even the spaces Lauren once exploited. Shared accounts, household favors, borrowed narratives, had been sealed like tombs. And unlike her curated stories, these could not be reopened by charm. She tried again last night, Pat said, scrolling absently through her phone. Posted a photo of a book you donated, claimed she co-wrote the funding proposal. Did anyone respond? I asked. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. No, Pat said. That's the worst part for her. It's not rejection. It's apathy. I stirred a spoonful of honey into my cup. That's how you know it's over. When the audience doesn't even boo. A faint breeze drifted across the porch. Somewhere inside, the kettle clicked off. Forgotten. Unnecessary. The latest allocation had been submitted that morning. An emergency grant to a shelter 2 towns over. No ribbon cutting, no press release, just quiet help offered on paper with nothing expected in return. It used to feel like I was trying to earn space in a story someone else was narrating. Now I didn't even need the microphone. A guest wandered into the garden, a former trustee, polite and soft-spoken. She handed me a small envelope, handwritten. From the girls at the transitional home, she said. They wanted to say thank you. I opened it after she left. Inside were 6 folded notes, each written in a different color pen. One said, "You made space for us, when no one else did." Another, "I don't know your name, but I feel like I should." I closed the envelope slowly, placing it in my lap. Not everything needed framing. Pat was watching. "That's your legacy," she said. "Not the plaque?" I asked, nodding toward the foundation's framed certificate inside. "Not even close," she replied. Nathan didn't show that day. He hadn't called in a week. No follow-up dinner, no agenda, just distance. It wasn't silence, it was deference, and I welcomed it. Lauren, on the other hand, had submitted an appeal. Victor called the night before. "It's thin," he said, desperate, a last gasp. "Let her file it," I said. Let her go on record with how much she didn't do. "She's burning her own narrative," he said. "She always thought the fire made her look powerful," I replied. But all it ever did was illuminate what she hadn't built. He'd been quiet after that. Just the sound of keys clicking in the background, followed by. Then we let the story finish itself. I stayed out on the porch long after Pat had gone. The air was heavy with jasmine and the light turning gold over the trimmed hedges. The house behind me, Mine now, no disputes, stood still, unfazed by memory. At some point, I pulled my journal onto my lap. At the top of the page, I wrote, "What peace looks like when no one hands it to you." Underneath it, just one word, mine. Then, as the sky deepened to violet, another message came through. Not from Lauren, not from Nathan, from unknown subject. Record's body. You should know. Someone is digging, not just into her, into you. No attachments, no name, just a signal. Because even peace, when earned publicly, invites envy. And some people can't stand the idea that you won without their permission. We set the table without ceremony. No centerpieces, no linen napkins folded into origami. Just warmth. Ceramic bowls, mismatched wine glasses, soft amber light from the fixtures Pat insisted gave restoration chic on a non-profit budget. The food was simple. Roasted squash, rosemary chicken, a sourdough I'd made from a starter passed down by a woman who once taught Lauren how to lie about potluck contributions. Victor arrived first. He always did. Quiet as usual, phone in his jacket, never letting it touch the table. "All clear," he said as he pulled out a chair. "The audit's complete, the appeal is dismissed, and your estate protections are now locked by irrevocable clause." I nodded. Good. He poured the wine himself. My bottle, my table, my moment. Then came Nathan. Hesitant. A little too put together. Dressed like a man who thought posture might grant him immunity. He didn't speak right away. Just looked around, registered the seating, and took the one farthest from the head of the table. Across from him sat Pat. She didn't hide her smirk. Lauren didn't show. She'd RSVP'd yes. Sent an oddly cheerful email about new beginnings and mutual closure. I'd read it twice, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to remember the way she dressed threats in soft fabric. She didn't need to be here to be seen. Her absence had grown louder than her presence ever was. Dinner began quietly, the kind of quiet you only get when there are no more illusions left to protect. Victor raised his glass first. "To clarity," he said. Pat followed. "To consequences." Nathan hesitated. "To truth, I guess." I lifted mine last. "To patience." We drank. Over the meal, Nathan tried, tentatively, to ask about the fund, about the guardianship clause, about whether I'd considered a reconciliation path for Lauren. I answered with grace, not because he deserved it, but because I did. "She doesn't need reconciliation," I said. "She needs silence." He nodded slowly, as if each syllable was a new language. "I didn't see it then," he said. "I thought the noise meant something was working." "It was," I said. "For her." The chicken was nearly gone when the doorbell rang. Sophie stepped inside, clean and composed. She handed me an envelope, a fresh report from the Oversight Committee. Lauren's last attempt to re-enter the system had failed. The back end was sealed. Her access was blocked at every point of entry. Victor scanned the summary quickly and smiled. "That's it," he said. "She's locked out. Permanently." "No more consultations," Sophie added. "No more public narratives. No more shared anything." "Just shadows," Pat murmured. I collected the dishes slowly, stacking them with care. The scrape of porcelain was the only sound. Nathan remained seated. He looked smaller now. Not because he was weak, but because he finally realized how much of himself he'd outsourced to someone who spent years impersonating strength. Pat joined me in the kitchen, drying plates as I rinsed. "You could have gone for something flashier," she said. "A gala, a press conference." "I don't need applause," I said. "I need peace." "You've got it." "I earned it," I corrected. Later, when the table was cleared and only tea remained, I brought out the service, the good set. Ivory porcelain, delicate rims, the ones she once scoffed at, the ones she claimed she bought, the ones she used to remind me that ownership didn't always mean access. I poured slowly, letting the steam rise between us like punctuation. Victor glanced down at his phone. "Final documents uploaded," he said. "Even if she files again, she'll be locked out of every claim, every title. The IRS, the banks, the foundations, all of it." Pat lifted her teacup toward me. "So?" I looked around the room, at Victor's quiet pride, Nathan's reluctant awe, Sophie's nod, Pat's toast, and felt it hit me, the weight of it all finally clearing. The story didn't end with the last filing. It ended here, with me, at the head of the table. I stood, smoothing the napkin in my lap. "Thank you all for coming," I said, "and for seeing what was always there." Pat leaned back, smiling. "You know, most people never get this kind of ending." "I didn't want an ending," I said. "I wanted a beginning she couldn't ruin." The room stilled at that. Nathan opened his mouth, then closed it again. I let the silence stretch. Not awkward, not hostile, just earned. Then, quietly, I lifted my teacup. "One last toast." "She sneered at my plates," I said. "I used her credit card to buy them, and let that speak louder than words." And then I sipped, slowly, letting that be the last thing the room remembered.